provocative question. Why are people so miserable today? Why are they so combative? Why are they so inimical to each other? Well, to take a question seriously is to reach out to its roots, the roots of our present condition pertain to a radical cleavage between the private and the public. People seek their freedom in private through the articulation of their feelings. They study sometimes, and when they do so, they try to give a voice to their feelings. This is a very modern phenomenon, an essentially modern phenomenon. We do not take seriously the discourse, the reasoning of earlier ages, of ages that are outside of the sphere of the modern world. Why not? Well, our forefathers, pre-modern forefathers, spoke not in private, but being exposed to the public. They were, at the same time, exposed to dire censorship or the threat thereof. The problem of dire censorship was characteristic of pre-modern ages. What has happened? Well, certain intellectuals of the modern world have proposed, the prophets or founding fathers of the modern world have proposed to constitute a sphere of privacy within which everyone could pursue their own purposes. Everyone could study, everyone could listen to their music, could draw their own pictures, could play their own games. And so without being disturbed, condemned by public authorities, by a government, be it secular or theocratic. This was a great thing, one might suppose. It allowed people to cultivate themselves without risking condemnation, without risking to be lynched for it. And yet, privacy led to a dulling of the mind. For the mind not being exposed to real problems is for the mind to flatter itself, to fall into dreams, its own dreams, and to mistake real questions for illusions. They're being replaced by whatever caters to our feelings. What does not cater to our feelings is not real. And so since the ancients and the medievals did not and do not cater to our feelings, they must simply be delusional. We must contextualize them, bring them to conform to our feelings, our expectations, in order for us to accept them. Now, this problem has led and is essentially bound to a predicament that we face today. The predicament is one whereby we are lost in a context that we do not question, that we fail to question, that we feel incapable of questioning. The context within which we live appears ever changing, irrational, fundamentally unintelligible. We may speak of evolution, of history. In any case, we do not question that context. Why? Not seriously. Not in its own meaning, because it has no meaning for us. No substantive, permanent meaning. Why? Because we have accepted that man is in private, thinks in private, privately, and of course can expose himself to the public sphere and try to influence it. But fundamentally, we are privately thinking. We have points of view. These points of view might express, to speak with Nietzscheans, might express the vortex, the absence of meaning, of totality, but without rising to those sublime heights of fantasy. We can simply say that in our ordinary life, we have our own sphere of privacy. We look at the world from our own perspective, and we make an effort to study, to understand the world by using sources, information, elaborating it, and building on other people's elaborations, perhaps. In any case, establishing our own castle, our own cathedral, even, of expertise, within a private sphere. The public is a machine. It's run by machines. Who runs the public? Bureaucrats. Not primarily theological concerns, obviously. What does this mean? It means that ultimate concerns are out of reach in practical terms. We can dream of ultimate problems. We can have a sublime experience, a mystical experience, a yearning for ultimacy. But in practical terms, there can be no legal, no public representation of what is ultimate. The public sphere is cut off from the ultimate, which is to say, really, that there is no rational link between the private and the ultimate, reality itself. If there were such a link, a rational link, which was in the past called natural reason, if there were such a link, then the space between the private and the ultimate would be necessarily exposed to the ultimate. It would be related to the ultimate. The political sphere that somehow separates the private from the ultimate, would be exposed to theological or ultimate questions. But modern man has rejected the theological political link. Is this good? Well, there were promises. Were those promises kept? No. what we have as a result of the obscuring or the abandonment of a theological political link is the reduction of the human being within a sphere of feelings that are managed and determined by external objectives, so to speak, machines. The public sphere as a machine impinges clearly upon the subject, not the way we could say, well, the theological authority might. It does not seek to investigate the heart of the private sphere, but it influences it from without in such a way that it manages to fuel our feelings and channel them without our being aware of it. The subtlety of the influence of the public mechanically structure on the private is hardly possible. It can hardly be underestimated. This leads us to abandon the challenge of rising to ultimate questions of real meaning. And so we wind up accepting because of that. Because in our lives at that point, the question of ultimate meaning is reduced to one of fantasy. We accept the manner in which the public determines our sphere of privacy. What can we do about that? Not much. Not much. As long as we do not expose ourselves once again to that pre-modern predicament, whereby we are not in private, thinking in private, but where we are thinking in a situation of exposure, even radical exposure to the public. We are thinking on the cross, to speak in Christian terms. We are exposed and naked. Socratically, we are exposed. Now, we could hide a bit, speak between the lines. We can live through writings instead of live dialogue. This would allow us to preserve our access to divine intelligibility. So in other words, to a realm of ultimate questions without falling into dreams and feelings. Yeah? But we don't do this. We can. We can in the respect that we have access, or to in the respect that we are touched by a discourse that exposes us, exposes our privacy, that is able to reach into our privacy, to free us from that privacy, that false freedom, that illusion, that little dream world that modern ideology had raised us in. A certain discourse can open us up to a very dangerous, wild predicament. Say, well, are we then once again exposed to the threat that Socrates was exposed to, a threat that is magnified for us in the Gospels so that everyone might see it in its stark valence, its consummate danger, the sense of danger. Well, this exposure involves a kind of heroic move on our part. And so it is the nature of things, of the human condition. Very, very few people will be really touched by that discourse that reaches into the darkness of our private delusion and come out of it as out of a cave, and face once again what Plato called a human cave, which is the situation where we're exposed to all kinds of dangers, even though we might not be aware of it, if we, to the extent that we conform to the public sphere. So the danger there is to conform directly, to assimilate entirely to whatever the public sphere says, to the civil religion, one might even say, of our times, without questioning it. Being determined in our fantasy, by it. But in fact, this is what is happening unwittingly. We fall into that trap today, with our private sphere being determined by the public, really, without our being aware of it. So we're really falling back into that situation that would otherwise seem quite dreadful. This return to a situation where the private sphere is killed. This is, one might say, communism, but modern ideologies aside, it would be a tribal mentality that is involved here. I think like everybody else, I am part of this establishment. So now, Socrates, of course, shows us, the example of Socrates shows us that there is a way out of it, and it's not the sphere of privacy that we have fallen into. What is that way out? The way out is is the way of genuine dialogue, genuine exposure to thought, to problems. And that involves direct participation in divine intelligibility. This participation was defended strenuously throughout what we call the Middle Ages. It had its detractors, its nominalist detractors, and the various nominalist currents of the Middle Ages coalesced, consolidated eventually, and came to transform into what we call the modern world through the various early fathers, founding fathers of that world. So that is the challenge that we are faced with, whether we know it or not, whether we hide or not in our private delusion being determined by machines. Exposing ourselves, being naked before our ultimate problems, but also vulnerable in public. Certain vulnerability, which again we see today as technology, this machine, the modern machine, comes and tries to probe our privacy, but we still cling to at least some little hidden corner of privacy. We can still dream in it, And yet our dreams are systematically being influenced by that machine. And they alienate us, of course, from the fundamental problem, which is that of the ultimate context of things. Is that context intelligible? Do we have rational access to it? In other words, can language, dialogue, dialogos, yeah? a logos, a speech that goes across, yeah? Can that dialogue reach out, yeah? And somehow bridge this gap between, well, our situation, the finite and the infinite, we might say. Today, we have rejected that, but our rejection is not absolute. We need not absolutely cling to that rejection. So if we are touched by a discourse that, well, manages to expose our privacy to ultimate problems, then we can be on our way. Prudence is something we have to cultivate because we're faced with all kinds of public exposure. So we need to cultivate prudence once again, the prudence that we had lost in private. Man is not really prudent in private today, right? He tends to be, well, rash and not moderate, but immoderate, of course, in private. Moderate only in public. Right. But that is not prudence. What we have here is fear. Prudence involves the capacity, the cultivation of the capacity of a strength to avoid extremes in practical terms. So to remain civil, once the human being, the finite, is exposed to the public at once and once again, the finite being at once set in a public sphere is exposed once again to the limits of that public sphere, the outer limits, which are the outer limits of the cave that Plato spoke of. Only if we stand in that public sphere again can we face those limits, can we try to come out of that cave and expose ourselves fully to what the medievals again call divine intelligibility, which is to say the world of ideas in Platonic terms, right? Those forms, ultimate forms that constitute the absolute limits of the public sphere. That is the challenge, and that is the message in a telematic bottle.